My name is Darnay Ramsey, and I'm 5.5.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. This is episode 12 in the Khan's Order series. We are around about page 32, so roughly a third of the way through the Khan's Order. In this episode, we'll wrap up with what she was talking about in the previous episode about capitalizing on profit from the widespread interest of the murder, and then also go into her comments about Darnay Hoffman, which are not particularly complimentary either. Now, I do think there's a conversation worth having that why did someone from Boulder not take on the Ramseys? I'm talking about a prosecutor. Why did it have to be someone coming from New York and someone who was sort of not the first person that would come to mind? And I think that the reason is the legal eagles representing the Ramseys were known far and wide, known throughout Colorado, and you didn't really want to mess with them. And so that is exactly what happened. If you want to make fun of the Ramseys, if you want to ridicule the pageantry, if you want to criticize the craziness on the Ramsey side of the story, I think to be fair, you've also got to look at the circus that was going on the other side. While there were certainly honest and good people, there were also fairly odd people that were on the other side of the story. Before we get to today's episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. You can click on the light blue icon at the bottom right of your screen. Have you done so? If you haven't, please do so. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Right, so we'll kick off on page 32. Khan's writes, quote, "For his part, Plaintiff 2 has appeared before the media and profited from discussing and critiquing the murder investigation. In 1997, the plaintiff voluntarily gave an interview to Hard Copy, a syndicated television program in which he claimed to be a suspect, and he received $5,000 compensation." We've sort of gone through that, and I want to pick it up where she says, "In addition, sometime during or before 1998, plaintiff, that is Chris Wolf, wrote a letter to Fox television reporter Carol McKinley recounting his interrogation as a suspect in the JonBenet Ramsey murder investigation. In the letter, he claimed," now listen to this, "in the letter, Wolf claimed that John Ramsey sexually abused JonBenet Ramsey, that the Ramseys' then 11-year-old son may have killed JonBenet, and that Ramsey was a merchant of death, responsible for the murder of innocent women and children in third world countries." Now, the irony of that is that I think there's some truth buried in that crazy paragraph, right? I think there's some substance to it, but of course, what is substance gets rubbished by the nonsense, unfortunately. Now we move on to page 33. It refers to plaintiff's counsel Darnay Hoffman also becoming interested in the case early in the murder investigation, and that Darnay Hoffman has contributed to the continued media interest through the filing of various lawsuits. The way that it is, when I look at the language here, you get the feeling she wants to say that this is frivolous and that he has actually exacerbated the media interest through, filing these lawsuits, which none of them really amounted to anything. I don't know if Darnay Hoffman won any of them. She goes on to say, in March 1997, Mr. Hoffman sent a letter to the Boulder County District Attorney Alex Hunter suggesting that Charles Lindbergh had killed his child in a hoax kidnapping and that one of the defendants had killed JonBenet in a similar type hoax. In May 1997, Mr. Hoffman sent Mr. Hunter a second letter in which Mr. Hoffman theorized that Mrs. Ramsey killed her daughter through a blow to the head in a fit of rage caused by unhappiness, depression, and marital problems. Now, once again, in the same vein as the scenario presented by Wolfe to McKinley, you have some truth, I think, buried in the nonsense here. So when he talks about a hoax kidnapping, I think some parts of that are true in terms of the Ramsey case, but in terms of the Charles Lindbergh case, I'm not sure if it was a hoax. And there's something very, 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 how many more varies can I say, very compelling about the Charles Lindbergh case. In fact, it is something that is brought up by John Ramsey himself occasionally as a way to compare to their story. And we're going to see in a moment why this is very compelling information. So we're going to deal with the Charles Lindbergh case separately in this episode. Just going further through the Khan's order, she talks about the second letter where she theorizes that Mrs. Ramsey killed her daughter. And okay, I don't agree with that part, but the part about there is a hoax, I think, is interesting. And you've also got to ask the question, why is the Charles Lindbergh case, which is dealing with something that happened in 1932, right? 64 years earlier. Why is that part of Darnay Hoffman's mindset? Where does that come from, and why also did John Ramsey bring it up? And we're gonna see why. So, to their credit, the Boulder authorities did not take Mr. Hoffman's unsubstantiated theories seriously and considered much of his submissions to be off the wall. I agree with that. I do think there was some substance, for example, to the fact that I think Patsy was to some extent unhappy, to some extent depressed, to some extent caught up in the flux of marital, whatever you want to call it, discord. In one of my episodes, I spoke about what the housekeeper overheard being said to Patsy, that she was a lousy homemaker. So there does appear to have been trouble in paradise, right? Then in the fall of 1997, Darnay Hoffman began to solicit the involvement of various handwriting experts. I think this is to his credit. Who else did this? Who else should have done it? And he claimed that although prior experts' reports given to the CBI showed Mrs. Ramsey to be at the very lowest end of the spectrum, in other words, there's little or no basis for a match. That is what the judge is sort of endorsing. It would be a career move for an expert to submit an affidavit for use by Mr. Hoffman. I must say, I find either what she's saying there speculative or something besides that, because I think it would be the opposite. If a handwriting expert went against what some of the high-powered handwriting experts were saying, that could actually be career suicide. And that is something that I think Sina Wong said. So if you're going to make this case that she's making, I think it's something that maybe the lawyers presented. I don't know if that is actually true. I disagree with it, put it that way. Part of why I disagree with it is I think it's not rocket science to see that there's a very good case to be made that it could be Patsy's handwriting, not just based on the idiosyncrasies of the handwriting itself, the common traits, but also the semantics. So there's quite a good case for it being Patsy's handwriting. So to say that it would be a career move to submit an affidavit, it really wasn't, given the legal team, the legal fortress that they were all up against, and ultimately we know what happened. They lost. She goes on to say, indeed, forensic document examiners were eager to jump into the high-profile investigation. That's also not true. There were a lot of people who weren't eager to jump into the investigation. I'm not really referring here to just document examiners, but other lawyers, let's face it, the district attorney didn't want to jump into, let me put it a different way. He didn't want necessarily the high profile investigation to go anywhere, right? And so I think if you crossed the Ramseys and you were a lawyer at once at cross purposes, but you were trying to present a counter narrative, you were going to get taken down. You were going to be discredited. So she goes on to say, in July 1997, Ms. Wong, now plaintiff's expert, had originally contacted the defendant's attorneys and offered to analyze the ransom note and point out weaknesses in analysis by government handwriting experts. Defendants declined such an offer. Now, I do think this is quite a good argument, is that you have Sina Wong, and I think there was another guy, Donald Foster, who actually put up their hands basically offering their services to the defendants, and then instead they were picked up by, I think, Darnay Hoffman, and then they basically provided analysis for them in support of Darnay Hoffman's case, right? And you can see something there that you could say, well, is this an objective opinion? But I think that same problem, whether it is or it isn't, you have that same problem on the other side of the equation. In September 1998, this is quoting from the Khan's order, Ms. Wong wrote to District Attorney Hunter, Assistant District Attorney Michael Cain, and Judge Roxanne Balin, asking to testify before the grand jury. By letter dated January 20th, 1999, Mr. Hunter rejected the request, informing Ms. Wong that it was his opinion that she did not use scientifically reliable methods. Her testimony would be inadmissible and that she lacked credibility. Now, what I think is something you've got to just sort of cut through the crap here is you've got to say, well, when he says scientifically unreliable methods, the fact that she didn't consult the actual original ransom note, I don't know if that would have been the case. I mean, that would have been the case. She would have been able to access the original ransom note had she been part of Team Ramsey, one would imagine, and then there would be no assault on her credibility, no criticism of, well, this wasn't scientific. I mean, the scientific reliable argument is basically, did you have the original ransom note or not? That's basically it. Then it goes on to say, in addition, Mr. Epstein, defendant's other handwriting expert, also wrote to Mr. Hunter at some time before the end of 2000 to offer his assistance in examining the ransom note. And so it goes on. I see I'm straying to some extent into the content of episode 13. And so I'm not going to take this episode any further than that in terms of those on YouTube. I'm going to discuss the Lindbergh case further on Patreon. So if you're interested in that, you need to head on to www.patreon.com/TCRS. It's on the $2 tier. I'll put a link in the description to this video. And it's really a fascinating subject, the Lindbergh kidnapping and how it echoes the Ramsey case. And so we'll be going through that through the remainder of this episode. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.